Today's video is going to be on photosynthesis. So looking at this big picture here, we have sun going in, water and carbon dioxide going in, and then sugar and oxygen are released. So what is photosynthesis? So it's a process that takes place in the chloroplast, which we know is an organelle only found in plant cells. It uses energy from the sun, and it converts water and carbon dioxide into oxygen and carbohydrates, which you should know by now is sugar. So chloroplast parts. So the chloroplast is the color green because it absorbs red and blue light and it reflects green light. So a little bit about the parts. So we have an outer membrane and an inner membrane. So all organelles are membrane bound. In the case of the chloroplast, it has two. The stroma is the aqueous space. Aqueous means like a watery space. So it's all of the space inside of the chloroplast. The granum is this whole stack. Kind of reminds you of candy. The thylakoid is each individual one within the stack. So the grana is a stack of thylakoids. And these are terms you will have to know. You need to know this diagram because you will have to label it on a quiz or test. So big picture. So this is a leaf. So what do we have going in? We have sun goes in. We have water coming in this way, which is technically from the roots. And then we also have your CO2, which is carbon dioxide. That's what you breathe out. So as a result, the plant releases oxygen, and it also releases glucose. Now, it doesn't really release glucose into the air. The glucose is what feeds the plant. So the formula. So this is a balanced equation, okay? So it's 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O makes, and we're going to drop down here, C6H12O6 plus 6O2. This formula is something you need to know. You need to have this memorized, okay? So when we look at it in terms of what these things are, this is your carbon dioxide. And we've done the biochem, guys, so this shouldn't be a problem to remember this. This is water. This is glucose and oxygen. And especially this one, you need to know that when you see that, this is the sugar glucose. So there's two major parts of photosynthesis, of the process. So you have the light dependent and you have the light independent. So dependent is going to mean it needs light to work. Okay? Light independent doesn't need light. In fact, it uses ATP that's produced in the dependent to function, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the light dependent produces your oxygen and it converts ADP into ATP. And the next slide will tell you all about ATP. So the light independent uses that ATP from up here. It uses that and it makes sugar. Okay? It also takes in, carbon dioxide comes in during the light independent. This is also known as the Kelvin cycle. Some of you guys had to do Melvin Kelvin for your activity in class today. So first, a little about ATP. So this is your big energy source. Your mitochondria makes a ton of this. This is why you function as well. But ATP is basically a huge energy storing molecule. Okay, but only for a few minutes because it's used constantly. So ATP stands for adenine triphosphate. Tri means 3. So there's 3 phosphates, okay? So you have adenine, ribose, which is a sugar, and then you have 3 of these phosphates. So this is, like I said, the source of all energy for the cell. This is where the cell gets all of its energy. And when a phosphate group breaks off, this is when your energy is released. And when that happens, it makes ADP. So then ATP versus ADP. So ADP is diphosphate, which means 2. So it only has 2 of your phosphates, still has the adenine and the ribose sugar. So the molecule, like I said, that results from ATP losing a P. So it becomes ADP. And then that P can be added back later, changing it back to ATP. I know this sounds really confusing, but we're going to go over this more in class, and hopefully it'll make more sense as we do that. So step 1 then is the light dependent, meaning it needs light. So this happens in the thylakoid. So once again, the thylakoid are those little things that you see on the left side of our chloroplast picture. So light strikes the chloroplast and hits the chlorophyll. So the chlorophyll is what's in the thylakoid. Okay? Then water enters the chloroplast. Then oxygen is given off. And I have a picture to show all of this in a minute. Which exits. This completely exits the chloroplast. Then NADPH and ATP are made. And very important right here. They are used to power the light independent. This is why the light independent doesn't need the sun's energy. So then you have light independent. This happens in the stroma. So this happens in that space. So this is your NADPH and your ATP move from the thylakoid, which were on the left side of the chloroplast. Here, I'll draw it down here. So they move from here into this open space, which is the stroma. Then carbon dioxide also enters the stroma, and as a result, glucose or sugar is made during the Kelvin cycle, and that leaves the chloroplast to feed the plant. So here's our picture that we will discuss much more, but you should definitely have this picture memorized. You need to know everything that happens in this picture. So everything you see in a green highlight is stuff going in. These are things going in. So light goes in, water goes in, okay, carbon dioxide goes in. Everything in the red is what's coming out. So oxygen comes out. Glucose comes out. Okay? Now, right here, let's erase this. So you will see that it says oxygen is a byproduct. So the plant doesn't do photosynthesis to make oxygen. The whole point of doing photosynthesis is for this right here. That glucose is the most important thing that we want. Okay? So you have your parts labeled, so your thylakoid, your granules, the whole thing. Your stroma is the space. A couple other things you need to remember is that ATP to ADP releases energy. Now ADP to ATP, so di to tri, needs energy, which if you see this arrow here, this energy is from the sun. So the sun gives the energy to make your ATP, your ADP, back into ATP. So if you see here, there's these little arrows. This section is also very important. It's a constant flow. So NADPH and ATP, that H, if you look over here, combines with CO2 to make glucose. Okay? And then you have NADP and ADP. This is going to go back into the light-dependent reactions, which are here, to make those again to go into the Kelvin cycle. Now, this picture may seem very overwhelming, but it's really important that you even just pause this and sit here and really, really study it. We're going to erase all of the drawing. And I just want you to pause this, take a look at it. I would sketch it in your notes. You definitely are going to need this diagram to study from.